Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I never expected a quiet weekend trip to the coast to turn into the kind of story you tell your friends and they say, "No way, that only happens in movies." But that's exactly what happened the day I met my neighbor on the beach. The day she looked at me, smirked, and said, "Eyes are up here." And I, without thinking, replied, "You wore that bikini on purpose." What followed wasn't just awkward laughs or beachside flirting. It turned into a slow, surprising unraveling of two lives that had been living right next to each other without really seeing one another at all. Let me rewind a bit. I'd moved into my apartment building about 6 months earlier. Nothing fancy. Beige walls, thin carpets, a balcony that looked over a parking lot, and if you leaned just right, a slice of ocean in the distance. I was newly single, burned out from work, and honestly just trying to reset my life. My neighbors were the kind of people you nod at in the hallway. Polite smiles. No names, no stories. Just strangers sharing walls. She lived 2 doors down. I noticed her the first week I moved in. Not in a dramatic way, more like she stood out. Always wearing headphones, hair tied up, moving fast like she was late for something important. We crossed paths at the mailbox, the elevator, the trash room. She smelled faintly like sunscreen even in winter, which felt strange but memorable. We never spoke. Not once. Until the beach. That Saturday morning, I woke up early for no reason other than my brain refusing to shut off. The ocean was calling. I grabbed a towel, threw on a shirt, and drove down before the crowds arrived. The beach was calm, the kind of calm that feels sacred. Soft waves, cool breeze, the sky just starting to turn that pale gold color that makes everything feel possible. I walked along the shoreline, shoes in hand, letting the water hit my ankles. That's when I saw her. At first, I didn't recognize her. Not really. She wasn't in workout clothes or rushing somewhere. She was standing near the water, wearing a deep blue bikini, staring out at the horizon like she was thinking about something heavy. The wind caught her hair, and for a moment she looked like someone out of a painting. I stopped walking. And yes, I stared. Not in a gross way. At least I don't think so. More like surprise, recognition, the mental click of realizing that the person you've passed 100 times without noticing is suddenly very real. She turned her head. Our eyes met. And then she said, "Eyes are up here." Not angry, not playful, either. Just matter of fact with one eyebrow raised. My brain short-circuited. Before I could filter myself, before the smart part of me could intervene, I said, "You wore that bikini on purpose." Silence. The waves crashed a little louder. A seagull screamed like it was judging me. For half a second, I was sure I'd just ruined everything. I prepared for the slap, the insult, the dramatic walk away. Instead, she laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. The kind that surprises you because it comes from the chest, not the throat. She shook her head and said, "You're bold. I'll give you that." I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. We started talking. At first it was light. Jokes about how early it was, how empty the beach felt, how the ocean always makes you think you're about to change your life even if you never do. Then the conversation shifted, slowly, naturally, into something deeper. Turns out, she lived in my building, 2 doors down. I told her I knew. She smirked and said she'd noticed me too. Said I always looked like I was carrying the weight of the world when I checked the mail. That stung a little because it was true. We walked along the shoreline together. No rush, no plan, just two people letting the morning stretch. She told me her name. I told her mine. She told me she worked remotely, designing websites for small businesses, but her real dream was photography. She said the beach was where she came to remember who she was before deadlines and expectations took over. I told her about my job, the burnout, the relationship that ended not with a fight but with silence, which somehow hurt more. She listened. Really listened. One point, she stopped walking and turned to face me fully. She squinted at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're not as closed off as you pretend to be," she said. I laughed it off, but inside, something shifted. We sat on the sand. Not too close. Close enough to feel the warmth of another person without crossing any lines. She pulled her knees to her chest and hugged them, staring out at the water again. "I come here when I need to breathe," she said. "My apartment feels too quiet sometimes." That surprised me. She seemed so put together, so confident. I hadn't imagined her feeling lonely. "I get that," I said. "Silence can be loud." She looked at me like I'd just said something important. We talked for hours. About family, about mistakes, about the weird pressure of feeling like you should have your life figured out by a certain age. The sun climbed higher, the beach filled with people. But we stayed in our little bubble, untouched by the noise. Eventually, she stood up and brushed sand off her legs. "I should go," she said. "But this was nice." "Yeah," I replied. "It really was." She hesitated, then smiled. "Guess I'll see you around, neighbor." And just like that, she walked away, leaving me standing there feeling like something had just started, even though nothing had really happened yet. Over the next few weeks, we ran into each other constantly. The hallway, the elevator, the grocery store down the street. But now, we talked. Sometimes it was just small stuff. Other times, we'd end up leaning against the wall outside our apartments, talking for an hour like time didn't matter. She started knocking on my door when she couldn't sleep. I started bringing her coffee when I knew she had early meetings. There was tension, the kind that hums quietly under the surface. Not rushed, not desperate, just there. One night, we found ourselves on my balcony, city lights flickering in the distance, ocean air drifting in. She was wearing an oversized sweater, hair loose, face bare. She looked nothing like the confident woman from the beach, and somehow everything like her at the same time. You ever feel like you're standing on the edge of something? She asked. All the time, I said. She nodded. Me too. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and smiled softly. I'm glad you didn't apologize on the beach. I raised an eyebrow. For saying you wore that bikini on purpose. Yeah, she said. It was honest. A little stupid, but honest. I laughed. I'm full of those moments. She stepped closer, not touching, just close enough that I could feel her presence. Good, she said. I like honest. Nothing happened that night. No kiss. No dramatic confession. Just two people acknowledging something. Unspoken. Weeks turned into months. We became part of each other's routines. Morning walks. Late night talks. Shared meals. Shared silence. People probably assumed we were together. In some ways, we were. In others, we were still figuring it out. One evening, back on that same beach where we'd first talked, she turned to me and said, "You know, I did wear that bikini on purpose." I laughed. I knew it. She bumped my shoulder. Not for you, for me. I was trying to remember how it felt to be seen. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and realized how far we'd come from that first awkward moment. I see you, I said quietly. She smiled, eyes shining just a little, and in that moment, I understood something important. Sometimes the best connections don't start with perfect lines or grand gestures. Sometimes they start with a slightly inappropriate comment, a raised eyebrow, and a laugh that breaks the tension just enough to let something real slip through. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes the best moments in life happen when you least expect them. And remember, sometimes the person you've been waiting to meet has been living 2 doors down all along.